The breakdown of my family began with something as mundane as a power outage. It happens every couple of months or so in our area. Power flickers off for a minute or two, sometimes even hours. When the electricity cuts out, our alarm clock resets to 12 a.m., and the LED lights start flashing to signal the interruption. If this occurs in the middle of the night, you only discover it when you wake up to find that the alarm didn't go off as it should have. That Tuesday morning, my world unraveled because of just that. I awoke to the flashing lights and realized with a jolt that I'd overslept by nearly an hour. I had a crucial meeting that morning that I couldn't afford to miss. In my frantic rush to get ready, I skipped some usual precautions, like locking the bathroom door. I was standing at the toilet when I heard a voice behind me. "I don't got one of those." I turned to see my daughter Laura standing there and watching me. Then she said something that turned my world upside down. "Uncle Billy has one of those too. His is bigger." I was stunned, momentarily forgetting that Laura was right there with me. I asked, "How do you know Uncle Billy has one too? How do you know his is bigger?" Laura replied, "I see it when he comes to see Mommy, and I know it's bigger because Mommy says so." "When did Mommy say that?" I asked, trying to stay composed. "Yesterday," Laura answered. "Yesterday she told Uncle Billy that his was bigger than yours." The enormity of her words hit me like a punch to the gut. I quickly grabbed a towel and wrapped it around myself. Laura's innocent repetition of what she had overheard was devastatingly clear to me. She had no concept of the full implications, but her words left nothing to the imagination. My wife was having an affair with my brother. It seemed so routine that Laura didn't think to mention it as anything special or noteworthy. There was no, "Daddy, guess what? Uncle Billy came over today." I knew deep down that I was probably in denial, but I kept telling myself, "Stay calm, Rob. Don't overreact. She's only 4. She might have misunderstood what she saw and heard." I dressed quickly, and when I went downstairs, Beth had already made coffee. She asked what I wanted for breakfast. I told her I had to skip it because I'd overslept and couldn't afford to be late for my meeting. I filled my travel mug with coffee, gave her a quick kiss, and then headed out the door. I got into my car and drove to work, my mind racing with the unsettling revelation. As I drove toward work, I replayed Laura's words over and over in my mind. Beth was a stay-at-home mom, but she did work from home, handling medical billing for various doctors and clinics. My brother Bill worked the afternoon shift at the box factory, which meant they had nearly the entire day to themselves from Monday through Friday. If Laura was telling the truth, and denial was quickly slipping away, then they had from the time I left for work until I got home to spend together. That was roughly 11 hours, give or take 30 minutes. Probably less, since Billy would likely wait an hour after I left before coming over, and he'd need to leave by 3:30 to make it to his shift at 4. That still left them with more than enough time to do whatever they wanted. I was tempted to make a U-turn, park down the block, and watch the house to see what really happened, but I couldn't afford to miss my meeting. My spying would have to wait until the next day. The drive to work gave me too much time to think, and the more I thought, the worse it got. The idea of Billy and Beth betraying me was bad enough, but the thought that they might be doing it in front of Laura, or at least not making any effort to hide it from her, was infuriating. That thought led to a few more unsettling possibilities. Maybe they didn't care about what Laura saw or overheard, or maybe they even hoped she'd eventually tell me. But why would they want that? They knew me well enough to understand how I'd react once I found out. Could they actually be anticipating the confrontation they knew would follow? If so, why not just tell me directly what was going on? It was too overwhelming to process. I started questioning why Billy would be involved with Beth when he had Annabelle at home. Annie was an attractive, alluring woman, and although I would never have acted on my thoughts, I had occasionally harbored some pretty lustful ideas about her. I forced those thoughts out of my mind. I needed to stay focused and clear-headed for my morning meeting. I managed to get through the meeting and the rest of the workday without too much trouble, though my mind was never far from the turmoil at home. As I drove back, those troubling thoughts returned with full force. I wondered why this was happening. There had been no signs of discontent from Beth, We still made love 3 or 4 times a week, and she continued to show affection as she always had. In hindsight, I couldn't pinpoint anything I had done to provoke such a betrayal. That realization stopped me in my tracks. Why was I trying to blame myself? It didn't matter what I might have done. There was no justification for Beth breaking her wedding vows. The responsibility for this mess lay squarely with her. The drive home gave me time to contemplate my next steps. Although my plan seemed clear, catch them in the act and then end things with Beth, the reality of it was daunting. Beth and I had been together since 9th grade, and I loved her deeply. I knew that my feelings wouldn't simply disappear because of her actions. It would take time, if I could ever fully move on. When I walked through the door, Laura ran up to me shouting, "Daddy's home! Daddy's home!" I scooped her up and hugged her as I carried her into the kitchen, where Beth was preparing dinner. As we entered, Laura announced, "Mommy, Mommy, Daddy's home." Beth looked up with a warm smile and said, "So I see." Then, turning to me, she added, "Dinner will be ready in about 5 minutes." Beth walked over, hugged us both, and kissed me on the cheek before returning to the kitchen to finish preparing dinner. I set Laura down and headed to the bedroom, changing out of my suit and into workout shorts and a t-shirt. When I returned to the dining area, Beth was setting the table. We sat down for dinner, and she asked what I planned to do afterward. I told her I intended to tackle some yard work. "Don't wear yourself out too much," she said with a wink. "You'll need some energy later." I replied that I'd save her plenty, while internally questioning, "What's wrong? Didn't you get enough from my brother today?" I couldn't turn down her offer. It would have seemed suspicious, and I'd never said no to her before. I needed to maintain appearances until I figured out what was really going on. Besides, it wouldn't be making love in the true sense. With everything I now knew, it would just be a way to pass the time. After mowing the lawn, weeding the flower beds, and tidying up, I called it a night. Beth was already in bed, reading, when I finished my shower and climbed in beside her. She set her book aside, pushed the sheet off, and said, "Hurry up, lover. I need it. I've been horny all day." Yeah, right, I thought. But then again, maybe she had been feeling that way because her daytime lover hadn't stopped by. Daytime lover? Absolutely. I had long since abandoned denial. Laura might have misinterpreted what Beth had said. Beth did manage to rouse me again, and I did my part. Afterwards, she cuddled up to me and said, "I love you, baby," before we both drifted off to sleep. I'm not sure how well Beth slept, but I barely slept at all. My mind was too restless, consumed by the thoughts that wouldn't let me be. On Thursday, I was out of the house before Beth even stirred from bed. The last thing I needed that morning was her cheerful send-off as I headed to work. I'd only suspect her cheerfulness was because she was anticipating a visit from her daytime lover. Once I got to work, the first thing I did was consult the Yellow Pages to find a local attorney. I selected one who offered a free initial consultation and set up an appointment for 3 p.m. It took just 10 minutes with the lawyer to get the grim news. Regardless of the reasons for my divorce, Beth would be entitled to half of everything and could potentially claim alimony. She would most likely get custody of Laura, which meant I'd be facing child support payments as well. The only slim hope he could offer was the chance to prove Beth was an unfit mother due to her infidelity in front of the child. "But I won't sugarcoat it," he said. "Proving that to a judge could be incredibly difficult. You might end up with a judge who believes her side. Much will depend on the investigation by social services. If they find the child credible, it could significantly strengthen your case." I considered this for a moment and then instructed him to start drawing up the paperwork. I'd let him know when I was ready for Beth to be served. Dinner was ready when I got home from work, and I made a concerted effort to keep things business as usual, and I think I managed it. Beth handed Laura an ice cream bar for dessert, and as she did, she gave me a wink and said, "You'll get your dessert upstairs." Naturally, I wondered if Billy hadn't visited that day, forcing Beth to settle for me. Then I caught myself. Beth hadn't changed. She was just being herself. She enjoyed making love, and we had been intimate frequently since we got married. It wasn't unusual for us to go 2, 3, or even 4 days in a row, and sometimes we'd been at it every day for a week or two. This led me to another thought. Was Beth seeing Billy because she needed more than I could provide? I was able to satisfy her in the evenings and on weekends, but did she have such a high libido that she needed it during the day as well? Ultimately, it didn't change the fact that cheating was cheating. Thursday night was another twuffer, and I again chose not to initiate a 69. If Beth noticed, she didn't bring it up. On Friday, I was too busy at work to dwell on Beth and my problems. After lunch, I told my boss I needed to take Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday off for personal reasons, and he had no objections. My main concern on the drive home was how to get through the weekend without giving Beth any hint that I was on to her. Friday night, Beth made no move toward intimacy, which made me wonder if Billy had visited that day and satisfied her needs. In the morning, as was our routine, we took Laura to IHOP for breakfast. For the rest of the day, I kept busy with yard work, gardening, and organizing the garage until Beth called me in for dinner. When I entered our bedroom, I found Beth naked and reading. As soon as she saw me, she set the book aside, got on her hands and knees, and glanced back at me with a playful woof woof. It was as clear an invitation as ever, so I moved in behind her and gave her what she wanted. On Sunday, I found enough chores around the house to keep my distance from Beth. Dinner went by uneventfully, and I spent the evening watching TV with Laura. I made sure to be in bed, pretending to be asleep, by the time Beth joined me. The morning started off normally with a goodbye kiss and a casual miss me as I left the house. However, things quickly took a turn. I stopped by Walmart to pick up a large thermos, then went to the B&B Cafe to fill it with coffee. After grabbing a copy of the local paper and USA Today, I headed back to the neighborhood. I noticed 4 vehicles similar to mine parked around, so my car at the end of the street blended in. I set up with my coffee and newspapers, ready to observe. If Billy didn't show up that day, I planned to stay on Tuesday and Wednesday. If nothing happened then, I'd come up with a new strategy. As 1 o'clock approached, I was starting to consider abandoning the stakeout when Billy's GMC pickup appeared in the driveway. He got out of the truck and went straight into the house without ringing the bell or knocking, indicating he was expected. I waited 20 minutes before driving up and parking in front of the house. I entered quietly through the front door and closed it just as softly. A quick look around the entryway confirmed Beth and Billy weren't in the living room. I moved silently through the downstairs, finding no sign of them, and a glance out onto the patio showed it was empty. This left only the upstairs, which consisted of bedrooms and a bathroom. I moved silently up the stairs, my cell phone camera ready for what I was about to find. I turned it on without hesitation. The first door at the top of the stairs was Laura's, and it was closed. The next door down the hall was to the spare bedroom, which was open, and from the stairs, clearly empty. That left the master bedroom, and its door was closed. I carefully turned the doorknob and eased the door open, finding exactly what I had anticipated. Beth and Billy were facing away from me, so they didn't see me as I snapped 4 pictures. When I shouted, "Hey!" both of them turned around. I managed to take 2 more shots before shoving my phone into my pocket and charging at Billy. My brother was 4 inches taller and about 50 pounds heavier than me. He had bullied me when we were younger until I hit him with a baseball bat at 13, which put an end to his harassment. Despite that, it was understood he could overpower me if it came to a fair fight. But none of that mattered now. Fueled by anger and hatred, I launched myself at him as he was pulling out of Beth. I hit him with enough force to knock him off the bed, causing him to slam his head against the wall. Stunned, he was unable to defend himself as I kicked him viciously in the groin and continued to pummel him mercilessly. The assault continued until a sudden sharp pain made me black out. When I woke up, I found myself in a hospital bed, and Beth was sitting in a chair next to me. "What happened? How did I end up here? And why the hell are you here?" I demanded. "I hit you with the table lamp," she said. "I was afraid you were going to kill Billy, and I had to stop you." "Oh, right. Can't have me ruining your little affair." "Bobby, I did it to keep you out of jail. If you'd killed him, you'd be behind bars. Laura needs her father here, not in prison." I'm sure Billy will be grateful for the countless thank you fucks you gave him. Not quite. I used the lamp on him too when he tried to attack you while you were out cold. I hit him harder than I hit you, and he's down the hall with a fractured skull. You still haven't answered my question. Why are you here? Because you're my husband, you're hurt, and I need to be here for you. Bullshit, Beth. If being your husband meant anything, you wouldn't have been in bed with my brother in my own house. I suppose we'll need to discuss that, but it will have to wait until you come home. Now's as good a time as any, I insisted. No, it isn't, Beth replied. You're in pain, and it's too soon. You need time to cool down before we talk. They're keeping you here for observation. We can discuss things when you're home. She got up and said, I'll let the nurse know you're awake. And then she left the room. A minute later, a nurse entered, followed by a doctor. I was informed that I had a mild concussion and would need to stay overnight. If everything looked fine in the morning, I could go home. Then the doctor added, If you're up for it, there's a police officer here who needs to speak with you. I knew it was inevitable, so I told the doctor to send him in. Detective Mike Bulla introduced himself and informed me that Beth had called 911 to get an ambulance for both me and Billy, and the paramedics had then notified the police. He asked for my account of the incident, which I provided. He shook his head and said, We have a complicated situation here. Your brother was in the house with your wife's permission, so he had every right to be there and to feel safe. He can press charges against you, and you would likely be found guilty. He can also file charges against your wife for what she did to him, though it's more complex. She claims she acted to protect you, and a judge and jury might accept that defense. You could also press charges against your wife, the detective continued, but the same logic applies since she claims she acted to prevent you from killing your brother. This means that, aside from his fractured skull, your brother walks away from this incident largely unscathed. Your wife might face jail time, though that's unlikely. You, on the other hand, could face serious consequences if your brother decides to press charges. Normally, in a case like this, you'd be arrested and held until your brother either recovered enough to state his wishes or until you could appear before a judge to be granted bail. However, my boss wants to handle this differently. I've been instructed to hold off on any immediate actions and to advise you not to leave this jurisdiction without our permission. Do you understand? I nodded, but I knew it wasn't my place to inform Bola that his boss was Beth's uncle. No head nodding, Bola said. I need to hear you confirm that you understand what I've just told you. I understand, I replied. He stood up, walked to the door, turned to face me, and said, I hope everything works out for you. Then he left. The nurse came in shortly after, gave me a couple of pills, and I soon drifted off to sleep. I woke up when they brought me a meal that barely deserved the name. I picked at it for a while, and after the tray was taken away, I was asked if I wanted visitors. When I inquired who, I was told it was my wife and daughter. Given my mood, I would have declined if it had been just Beth, but I couldn't say no to Laura. I propped myself up, though it made my head throb, and when Laura entered the room, she ran to me, crying out, Daddy, Daddy. I embraced her and then had to field a barrage of questions. When she asked why I was in the hospital, I glanced at Beth, who flinched slightly as I said, Daddy fell and hurt his head, sweetie. It's getting better, and I'll be home tomorrow. As the visit ended, Laura gave me hugs and kisses. When Beth came over to kiss me, I turned my face away. She whispered, I know you don't believe it, Bobby, but I do love you. They left, and I sank back onto the bed, staring at the ceiling and cursing my brother for the mess he had caused in my life. In the morning, Beth and Laura came to pick me up and drive me home. With Laura in the car, Beth and I didn't speak, and honestly, I wasn't in the mood to talk. What was there to say? I had caught her in the act, and she couldn't deny it. I believed her when she said she hit me to prevent me from killing Billy, but that was only because of what I had learned from the nurses. Beth had done far more to Billy than just use the lamp to fend him off. She had targeted other parts of his body as well, leaving him with 2 broken ribs, damaged testicles, and a fractured skull. I knew we'd need to talk eventually, but I wasn't ready for it yet. When we got home, I saw a furniture company truck parked out front and two men carrying something inside. I looked at Beth questioningly, but she didn't offer any explanation. Inside, I saw that they were setting up a new bed in the master bedroom. I wasn't naive. I understood why Beth was replacing the bed I had caught her and Billy on. But changing the furniture wasn't going to fix the situation. My head still ached, so I took a couple of the pain pills from the hospital and retreated to the guest bedroom to rest. Beth woke me for dinner, and I was relieved that Laura was eager to be the center of attention. Beth and I needed to talk, but I was too frazzled to have that conversation right then. I needed to calm down. No, I needed to calm down a lot. Of course, that was exactly what I didn't get. We were nearly finished with dinner when the doorbell rang. I went to answer it, and when I opened the door, Billy's wife, Annabelle, pushed past me and into the house. I closed the door and turned to see her standing there, staring at me. "Damn it, Bobby! Why haven't you been answering your phone?" Annabelle demanded. I recalled dropping my phone into my coat pocket before I charged at Billy, but I wasn't sure where it was now. It was probably wherever my coat was. That thought led me to wonder if Beth had gotten rid of the phone or deleted the photos. I'd need to find out, but for now, I said, "I've misplaced the phone, Annie. I want to know what's going on, Bobby. Bill's in the hospital, and he's seriously messed up. The story I got is that you put him there." "Well, I guess in a way I did." "What the hell did you do to him, Bobby? A fractured skull, possible loss of both testicles, 2 broken ribs, and other injuries." "I came home and found him in the bedroom with Beth. I lost it and went after him." "Bullshit, Bobby. Bill would never cheat on me." "Come into the kitchen with me," I said, heading towards it. After a moment's hesitation, she followed. I told her to sit down while I set Laura up in front of the TV. When I returned to the kitchen, I said, "Annie wants to know why Billy is in the hospital. Beth, why don't you tell her? Maybe she'll believe it coming from you." Beth looked away, so I urged, "Come on, Beth. Annie wants to know, and she doesn't believe me." Beth burst into tears and fled the room. "It's true?" Annabelle asked, horrified. "She was sleeping with my husband?" "Afraid so. I have pictures if I can find my cell phone." "How long has this been going on?" "I have no idea. I just found out last week and took a few days off work to catch them in the act." I explained what I'd walked in on and the aftermath. "And you're still here with her?" "I only got out of the hospital this morning. I haven't had a chance to do anything yet." "What are you going to do?" "I've already seen a lawyer and started the divorce paperwork. I'm trying to keep Laura in the house, but if I can't, I'll have to find somewhere else to go." "No, you won't. I've got plenty of space now that I'm kicking my cheating husband out. When you find your cell, I want a copy of those pictures. Who's your attorney? Maybe if I use him, we can get a group discount." Her comment made me smile, but Annie continued, "I'm serious, Bobby. You can move in with me." "No, I can't, Annie. You know I wouldn't be able to keep my hands off you." "So what? It would serve both of them right if we did hook up." "Probably, but it would complicate the divorce. It might even give them grounds to countersue. This state is no fault, so I don't need to provide a reason, but I'm going for adultery to try for custody of Laura. Us being together wouldn't look good to the court or the Child Protection Office." "Well, the offer stands, Bobby, for both of you." I promised to get her the pictures when and if I found them, and gave her the name of my attorney. After she left, I spent time with Laura, watching cartoons until it was time for bed. I read to her until she fell asleep, and then started looking for my phone. I considered 2 possibilities. The paramedics might have taken my coat off when they checked my vital signs and left it on the bedroom floor, or it might have been removed at the hospital. If it was the latter, it should be in the bag of belongings I brought home with me when I was discharged. I checked the bag first, but my coat and phone weren't there. If my coat had been removed before I was taken away on the gurney, Beth would have likely picked it up and hung it in the closet. She wouldn't have left it on the floor with the furniture guys coming. If that's what happened, would Beth have had the foresight to retrieve the phone and either delete the pictures or toss it? The only way to find out was to check the bedroom where she was hiding from Annie and look in the closet. I entered the bedroom and found Beth sitting on the edge of the bed, seemingly exhausted from crying. She watched me closely as I approached the closet. My coat was hanging there, and when I checked the pockets, I found the phone. A quick glance at the photos confirmed they were still intact. I slipped the phone into my pocket and turned to leave. Beth cleared her throat and asked, "What are you going to do?" "That's a question you should already know the answer to. Discovering you with my brother was a deal breaker. I've already seen a lawyer and started the divorce process." "I don't want a divorce, Bobby. I love you, and you know that. Just not enough to stop cheating on me, right?" "I wasn't cheating on you, Bobby. Your brother was blackmailing me." "Blackmailing you?" "He discovered something about me that I couldn't let you know. He told me that if I didn't sleep with him, he would reveal it to you. I love you, Bobby, and I had no choice but to give in to him to keep you. If you ever found out what I've done, you would have left me instantly." "Well, it doesn't matter now. What's this deep, dark secret I can never know?" "I can't tell you. Can't or won't. It doesn't matter. They're the same. You can never know. Not even if there's a slim chance of saving your marriage? If knowing the secret has even the slightest chance of saving our marriage, it would destroy it. You can't ever know, Bobby. Not ever." I shrugged and left the room. To be cautious, I hid the phone before heading to the guest bedroom and settling into bed. I'd been lying there for about 20 minutes when the bedroom door creaked open. Beth entered and sat down on the edge of the bed. I stayed silent, and after a moment, she spoke. "I know you doubt it, Bobby, but I do love you. I love you more than anything, and I swear on everything sacred to me that I only slept with your brother because it was the only way I could see to keep you. If that's true, then why were you telling him that his was bigger and better, and that he loved you more than I ever did? I said those things because he wanted to hear them. I needed to keep him happy, to prevent him from revealing what he knew. Honestly, I never understood why Annabelle stayed with him. I need you, Bobby. I can't lose you. I promise I'll do everything in my power to make it up to you. Just give me a chance. Please, Bobby, just give me a chance." "You'll do everything except the one thing that matters most. Before I can even consider staying with you, I need to know what you were so desperate to hide from me. What was so terrible that you were willing to sleep with my brother to keep me from finding out?" "I can't tell you, Bobby. I just can't." "Then we have nothing more to discuss. Please leave. I have a long day ahead of me tomorrow and need my rest. Please, Bobby, just let me... Get the hell out of here, Beth. Just get away from me." She began to cry again, but stood up and left. The next morning, I was up before Beth and Laura. I retrieved my cell phone from its hiding spot and headed to the Waffle House for breakfast. When I checked the phone, I saw several missed messages and 2 voicemails from my dad. Not surprising. He'd likely heard about Billy being in the hospital and probably wanted to know what had happened. I knew he'd be eager to hear my side of the story, but I wasn't going to give it to him. He'd have to hear it from my brother. He wouldn't believe me anyway. To my parents, William could do no wrong. He was their golden child, and I could never understand why. I had outperformed him in nearly everything. I was a straight-A student, while he barely managed to C average. He maintained just enough grades to play sports, but I excelled there too. Despite being 2 years younger, I made the starting lineup as a wide receiver in my first year of high school, while Billy was mostly a bench warmer. I earned all-state honors in both junior and senior years and got a full scholarship to state. I graduated with a degree in business management and landed a great-paying job, while Billy ended up working second shift at the box factory. Yet, somehow, he was still their favorite. I'd known about the favoritism since I was old enough to recognize it, but it never bothered me too much. I was confident in my abilities and achievements, knowing I outperformed Billy in most things. I always felt loved by my parents. It was just that Billy seemed to get a little more of their attention. I planned to return his calls eventually, but I'd wait until he'd had his first dozen cups of coffee. Despite being on a day off, I went into work to use my computer and printer to make several copies of the photos of Beth and Billy. After that, I called Annabelle to see if she was home. I reached her just as she was about to head to the hospital. I told her I had the copies she wanted, and she said she'd be home around 5 that evening. I promised to drop by sometime between 5 and 6. The rest of the morning was spent opening a new checking account in my name and moving some assets. I left our checking account untouched, but withdrew half of our savings and took 5 of the 9 CDs from the safe deposit box. Beth had 2 credit cards in her name, and I had 3 in mine. We also had 3 joint credit cards, which I canceled. At 11, I called my dad, and the conversation went as expected. He was upset that he hadn't been informed when Billy was hospitalized, and was incredulous that I could have done something so severe to put my own brother in the emergency room. "We're family, Bob. We should be able to work things out without resorting to violence." "Sorry, Dad, but being family is part of why this happened." "What do you mean by that?" "You'll need to ask my ex-brother about that." "Ex-brother? What do you mean by that?" "Just what I said. He's no longer considered family. You can bet I'll be gunning for him whenever we're in the same room." "It can't be that bad." "Oh, it can be." "You need to come by the house, Bob. We need to get to the bottom of this before it gets any worse." "Sorry, Dad. There's no fixing this. I'll visit later tonight or tomorrow, but right now I've got too much to do." To prepare for any potential fallout, I spent the rest of the day exploring apartment options. Annabelle's offer was increasingly appealing. At 5:10, I called Annabelle to confirm she was home. When she said she was, I headed over. I'd be lying if I said the thought of getting even with Beth and Billy by being with Annabelle didn't cross my mind. It did, and it lingered more than it should have. Annie didn't help matters when she answered the door in a blouse that revealed a lot of cleavage, and a skirt so short I could see her panties if she bent over. I quickly realized I was mistaken. Annabelle wasn't wearing any panties. It was clear she was making an effort to seduce me, and her high heels, which I had always found a major turn-on, only added to the temptation. Annabelle knew exactly what she was doing, and it was working. During my marriage to Beth, I had never even considered cheating. I'd seen plenty of attractive women who I might have been interested in, but I never acted on those impulses. I was committed to Beth and truly loved her, so I stayed faithful despite numerous opportunities. That had changed now. Although Beth was still legally my wife, her betrayal had effectively ended our marriage. In my mind, when she broke her vows, she released me from mine. The complication was that I wanted custody of Laura. I knew that if I got involved with Annabelle, it would paint me in a negative light, potentially undermining my case and reflecting poorly on me just as much as Beth's infidelity did. How did I end up breaking my resolve to stay away from Annabelle? It came down to a mix of intense desire for retribution and the need to release the pent-up anger I felt after our dinner conversation. Annabelle had visited Billy at the hospital and found him in a somber state. He'd just been told that his right testicle would need to be removed due to severe damage. Whether the injury was caused by Beth's use of the lamp or my own kicks wasn't clear. When Billy shared this with Annabelle, she told him it didn't matter to her because she had decided she would never be intimate with him again and was seeking a divorce. She also questioned him about why he had destroyed their marriage. Billy pleaded with her not to leave, insisting that he loved her and that Beth was merely a sexual affair. Annabelle, in turn, told him she couldn't consider staying with him until she understood why he had acted the way he did. According to Billy's account, his actions were driven by long-standing resentment towards me. He claimed that his desire to have sex with Beth was his way of getting back at me. He felt that because I went to college and he didn't, somehow that was my fault. He believed I had intentionally overshadowed him in sports, both football and baseball, while he was relegated to the bench. In his view, he proved his superiority by satisfying Beth in ways he felt I couldn't. Billy insisted that Beth had told him he was better in bed and even wished she had married him instead of me. I laughed at the absurdity and shared with Annie what Beth had told me about Billy's supposed prowess. In return, Annie revealed the one thing Beth had stubbornly refused to disclose, the reason behind the blackmail. Apparently, Billy had once come by to borrow my power washer and stumbled upon Beth in bed with my father. My father. No wonder Beth was so desperate to keep that secret. My own father and my brother involved with her? It was a revelation that left me reeling. Billy had taken a couple of pictures with his phone and left quietly. The next day, he confronted Beth with the photos and demanded a price to keep them from me. Learning this changed everything for me. My vows meant nothing now. Thoughts of Laura were pushed aside. I couldn't care less about the fallout with Billy and Beth. I turned to Annie, asked her directly if her outfit was meant to tempt me, and when she confirmed it was, I wasted no more time. I suggested we skip the small talk and head straight to the bedroom. Afterward, Annie and I showered together. She tried to get me interested again, but I was spent. I wished I had more to give, but I was thoroughly exhausted. As we dressed, Annie said, "Just a couple of things. First, you were way better in bed than Billy ever was. Second, while I was at the hospital, I managed to grab Bill's cell phone." She handed it to me. I checked our computer, and he hadn't uploaded the photos, so these might be the only ones in existence, if that matters. She continued, "I hope tonight wasn't a one-time thing. I meant what I said about Bill being out and you moving in. Even if you don't move in, I'd love for you to visit often. No promises, but I definitely like the sound of your ideas. I have a lot going on right now, and I'm not sure how things will unfold. We'll stay in touch." I gave her a kiss goodbye and headed back to my now empty home. It was 1 a.m. when I got home, and I was surprised to see Beth still awake. She was slouched on the living room couch with a glass of wine in one hand and a bottle on the table in front of her. "Where have you been?" she asked, her voice tinged with worry. "I've been so anxious, thinking something might have happened to you." "Something did happen to me," I replied coldly. "I discovered that the woman I loved was unfaithful. It hurt so much that I couldn't bear to come home." Beth's eyes flashed with anger. "I'm not unfaithful. I was forced into it to keep you. Damn it, Bobby. You know I love you. I didn't want to lose you, so I had to give in to Billy." "That's a load of crap, Beth. You're the one who made these choices. Now I'm left wondering, was it just my family you were involved with? Or were there others besides my brother and father? How many others have there been since we made our vows? Is Laura even my daughter?" Her face went pale at the mention of my father, but quickly flushed with anger when I questioned Laura's paternity. "How could you?" Beth shouted, her voice breaking. "How could you doubt that Laura is yours? She's so much like you. Everyone can see the family resemblance." "Yes, the resemblance is clear," I replied coldly. "But the question remains, which male member of my family is responsible? My father? My brother?" Beth sank into the couch, her voice barely a whisper. I thought you loved me. How could you say such things? You love me. I know you do." "Not anymore, Beth. I used to love you. Seeing you with Billy shattered that love, and discovering you with my father drove a stake through it. I've already spoken to a lawyer and started the divorce process. You should hear this directly from me. I'm seeking full custody of Laura and will claim that you're unfit to be her mother." "What?" Beth gasped. "You can't do that. It isn't true, and you know it." "You're mistaken," I said firmly. "I not only know it, but I can also prove it." "That's nonsense, Bob." "No, it isn't, Beth. How do you think I found out about you and Billy? I didn't just come home and stumble upon it. Laura told me everything." I told Beth how Laura had informed me of what happened. Beth protested. "She couldn't have seen anything. Your brother never came over until after I'd put Laura down for her nap." "Maybe you and Billy were loud enough to wake her," I countered. "Regardless, I'm certain the courts won't look favorably on you having adulterous encounters in front of our daughter. Combined with the photos I have of you with my brother and my father, I believe I have a strong case for custody. Please, Bobby, don't do this to me. Don't take both of you away from me. It will destroy me. Losing you will be devastating enough, but losing my baby too? I can't bear it." "Those are the consequences of your actions," I said. "You should have thought about this before you slept with my brother and my father." "I didn't do it willingly, Bobby," she pleaded. "Your father was an accident. Billy found out and threatened me. I had to give in to him, or he would have exposed everything. I couldn't risk losing you, Bobby. I love you more than anything, and I couldn't stand the thought of losing you. My dad was an accident? How could being with him be an accident? I didn't make love with your father. He came by to see you, but you weren't home. He'd been drinking and asked if I had anything in the house. I made him a drink, and since he didn't want to drink alone, I had one too. He started asking me questions about women, and I had the impression he was having trouble with your mom. We talked and had a few more drinks, and I must have had too much because I fell asleep. When I woke up, he was on top of me. When he finished, he suggested we continue in that bedroom. I told him I needed to use the bathroom first and would join him shortly. Instead, I went to the kitchen, grabbed a knife, and headed for the bedroom. When I entered, he was trying to revive himself. I told him to hurry up and get it hard, as it would be easier to cut off that way. He saw the knife and fled the house in a panic. Billy didn't witness that part. Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you trust me enough to confide in me? Because I knew how you'd react, Robert. As soon as you found out, you would have gone after your dad. And he'd deserve whatever came his way. Yes, but what about your mother? How would she have handled it? Her husband having an affair with his daughter-in-law? Her oldest son blackmailing his sister-in-law for sex? It would have ripped your family apart. Your father deserved whatever retribution came his way, but your mother would have faced the collapse of her family, and she didn't deserve that. By keeping quiet, I was the only one who had to suffer, and that was because your reprehensible brother was blackmailing me. Now that everyone knows, everyone gets to suffer, she said, her voice heavy with bitterness. Annie, Laura, your mother, maybe even your dad, though I haven't been near him since he attacked me. He was probably drunk and might even regret what he did. But the biggest loser here is me. I've lost everything I care about because I fell asleep that night when your father was here. It sucks. She got up and left the room, leaving me alone with her words, which I couldn't help but agree with. It did suck. Beth stayed in the bathroom until I went to bed, and I guessed she spent the night on the couch. At least, that's where she was when I woke up in the morning. I didn't stick around for breakfast and left before she could wake up. In the garage, I reached into my coat pocket for my keys and pulled out a cell phone. I had forgotten that Annie had given me Billy's phone. My curiosity got the better of me, so I turned it on and navigated to the photo gallery. There were a dozen or so pictures, and I scrolled through them until I found the ones of Beth and my father. There were 3 pictures, and they were damning enough to make Beth's actions seem justified in her eyes. She was right about knowing what I'd do. I backed out of the garage and drove toward my parents' house. As I drove, I thought about the stark contrast between Beth's perspective and mine. She believed my mother didn't deserve to be hurt by confronting my father, while I thought it was crucial for Mom to know what a scumbag her husband was. As usual, I walked in without ringing the doorbell or knocking. Mom greeted me with a warm smile and a hug, asking if I'd had breakfast yet. I returned the hug and told her I could use a cup of coffee. She led me to the kitchen table and promised to bring me a cup, prepared just the way I liked it. Cream, no sugar. I was savoring my first sip when Dad strolled into the kitchen, grabbed a cup, and took a seat at the table. "What brings you by at this hour?" he asked. "You said I needed to come over so we could sort out the mess with Bill," I replied. "What could be so serious that it put your own brother in the hospital?" he asked. "I caught him with my wife." Mom immediately scolded, "Robert, watch your language," while Dad's face went pale and he turned away in disbelief. "I have pictures of them together," I continued. "I'm thinking of putting them in the family photo album, right next to the ones of you with Beth." "Robert, are you out of your mind? How dare you say such things?" Mom exclaimed, but Dad's ashen face remained turned away. I pulled Billy's phone from my pocket, pressed a few buttons, and handed it to Mom. "Here's how I can say that," I said. Mom took the phone and examined the pictures as I explained. "That's Billy's phone. He saw what was happening, took the pictures, and left without being noticed. He was using those photos to blackmail Beth until I intervened. That's why your oldest is in the hospital. I got a bit carried away when I discovered everything, and I reacted pretty intensely." With tears streaming down her face, Mom handed me back the phone and then slapped Dad across the face with such force that his chair tipped over. "You bastard!" she yelled at him. "How could you?" "It's your fault," he said, scrambling to his feet. "You cut me off from sex because you just weren't interested anymore. Maybe you can switch it off like that. But I'm a man, and I need a sex life. It had been so long, and she looked so irresistible lying there. I couldn't control myself." I got to my feet and told my mom, "You're welcome to visit me anytime. Then I faced my dad and said, "You're getting a break for now because I won't handle you the way I want to in front of Mom. But if I catch you away from here, I'll do my best to put you in the hospital right next to my ex-brother." I got up, left the house, and went to work. Of course, the story didn't end there. Billy ended up losing both of his testicles, which drove him to press charges against Beth and me. The assistant district attorney handling our cases tried to get us to accept a plea deal, but Beth and I both refused and chose to face a jury instead. We were tried separately, and as Detective Bulla had anticipated, the jury acquitted Beth. I faced a half-dozen charges, but the jury found me not guilty on all but one. I was convicted of simple assault. Despite the conviction, the judge imposed the minimum sentence and suspended it, meaning that if I kept out of trouble and behaved myself for a year, the conviction would have no lasting impact. This arrangement ensured that I wouldn't be a threat to my dad unless I wanted to risk serving out my sentence plus additional time for any future offenses against him. Annabelle divorced Billy and took everything he had. Once news of Billy's actions and his subsequent losses spread, he became the laughingstock at the box plant. He had been in line for a promotion to shift foreman, but the position went to someone with far less experience and seniority. It didn't help that the company owner was a devout Christian who had little tolerance for adultery. Billy couldn't handle the relentless ridicule at work and eventually quit his job, but the word had already spread, and he faced the same scorn wherever he went. He ended up leaving town, and I have no idea where he went, nor any desire to find out. Mom and Dad went through a rough patch, but somehow managed to stay together. I haven't seen my father since the day I walked out of his kitchen, and while I see my mother regularly, he is never mentioned. My evening with Annabelle was a one-off, as our British cousins might say. We've stayed good friends, and I was recently an usher at her wedding to a really nice guy. As far as I know, our evening together is known only to the two of us. Beth and I are still together. The pictures on my brother's phone clearly showed she was either asleep or out of it, while my father did what he did. It took me some time to come to terms with what she did with Billy, but eventually I understood that she felt she had no other choice if she wanted to keep our marriage intact. It hasn't been easy. I'm still hurt that she didn't trust me to understand and support her. On her part, she struggles with the feeling that I don't fully trust her anymore. These issues come up from time to time, but we work through them. Our love for each other, along with our daughter Laura, is what keeps us together. We should be okay. At least, that's my hope.